Hello, this is Dan Stever, publisher at the Gazette, and today you're joining an editorial board meeting here at the Gazette. Our editorial board meeting today and over the next week or so are going to be visiting with mayoral candidates and asking them questions about themselves and about their view of the city and some of their potential plans for managing the city should they be elected mayor. Many of our questions were submitted by readers in a couple of sessions we had last week with readers, and asking them the question, what's important to them and what do they need to know to make an informed decision. So this is our first time doing a live streamed event in the editorial board meeting, so I hope you find it informative and you get something out of it. But this is our first time through, so you might see some people walk in and out. With that, we'll get started. We are with today, again, mayoral candidate and former Attorney General John Suthers. And we'll get started, John, if it's okay to
Absolutely.
Dive right in. Our first question is just kind of an open-ended question for you, and it is, why are you running and why do you think you make the best candidate?
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to meet with you today. I appreciate the invitation. But that question, interestingly enough, why are you running, is the one I get asked the most. I think there's a notion, John, you've held statewide public office. Why are you running for mayor of Colorado Springs? Particularly when any knowledgeable person knows that given the challenges facing Colorado Springs, this is going to be a very difficult job. My answer is quite simple. This is a labor of love. I'm running for mayor of Colorado Springs because I love Colorado Springs. I lived here all my life. I literally grew up with this city. You know, I have fond memories. This city's part of my DNA. I remember playing at Memorial and Vermejo Park in Park and Rec baseball. I was on the Sears and Roebuck Orioles, and Goose Gossage was on the Babes Market Red Sox. I just wish my mother had saved the score sheets that would have shown that I got lots of hits off the Goose, or not. I remember as a young lawyer, being summoned into Mayor Bob Isaac's office. I was representing the Police Protective Association, and it was a wage and hour issue. And he sat me down and he said, I don't think the position you're advocating is in the best interests of the city. And my knees were knocking, and I kind of sheepishly said to the mayor, with all due respect, Mayor, I don't represent the city, I represent the Police Protective Association. And he looked back at me kind of sternly, and then he broke a smile and said, that's the right answer. I just tell you those anecdotes to tell you that Colorado Springs is a part of me. I've watched this city grow from 40,000 to 460,000 people. We are now the 41st largest city in America. We're larger than Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Minneapolis, Oakland, New Orleans. Not the metro area, but the city itself is larger than those cities. And we know from looking around us that large cities either grow economically or they stagnate. And we can see around the United States today the consequences of stagnation. And it's up to us as the citizens of Colorado Springs to determine which direction the city's going to go in the next several years. We've got incredible assets. I can't think of another city in the largest 50 cities in America with the physical setting that we've got. There's only one Pikes Peak, there's only one Garden of the Gods. We've got man-made assets. There's only 4 cities in America that are home to a service academy. There's only a handful of cities in America that can say that they've got a top 25 liberal arts college in the core of the city. Only 3 cities in America with a national leadership center, and of course there's only 1 city in America that can claim to be home to the United States Olympic Committee. I think our people and their entrepreneurial spirit are our greatest assets. There's some wonderful things percolating in Colorado Springs right now. UCCS has turned into a dynamic institution with over 11,000 students. There's some positive things going on at the airport in the commercial aeronautical zone. There's some things downtown, whether it be an Olympic Museum, the Braxton Technologies acquisition of the Santa Fe station for a Catalyst campus, and the development of the old Gazette building and the St. Francis Hospital. There's some things percolating. We've got some entrepreneurial things going on in cybersecurity, aerospace, medical innovation that we need to nurture and support, because it's those existing businesses that are going to be the major producers of new job growth in Colorado Springs. You know, we know that 85% of new jobs are created by existing companies. Yes, we're going to go out and try and attract companies to Colorado Springs, but most of our growth is going to come from what's here, and we have to nurture and support it. So with those assets, what's our major problem? Folks, I would suggest to you that our number one problem is that the political environment in Colorado Springs for the last several years has not been conducive to community and economic development. And that's had ramifications. That's part of the reason that we have allowed our infrastructure to deteriorate, because of the lack of political cohesiveness. This is not just anecdotal. I've heard from companies who have a presence here who say what's keeping them from expanding is their lack of confidence that their investment would be rewarded by a city that with a vision moving forward, and a city doing the things that cities have to do, including invest in infrastructure. So my priorities as a mayor would be, number one, let's change the political environment to make it more conducive to economic development and community development. Part of that is infrastructure, investment in infrastructure, and then I think we'll be much better poised to aggressively promote and attract new job creation. Let me just briefly say what I think I uniquely bring to the table in this race. Number one, executive management experience, executive leadership and executive management experience. I'm the only person in this race who's been the one person in charge of large organizations. You know, I didn't share it with other councilmen, other commissioners. I'm the guy that was in charge of the largest law office in Colorado for the last 10 years, very large public law offices in the U.S. Attorney's Office and the DA's office, and a Department of State Government that had 3 times as many employees as the city of Colorado Springs, and a budget that was more than twice the size of Colorado Springs. And I've had that management experience. The other thing that I think I uniquely bring to this task is the connectedness to the rest of the state of Colorado and to some extent the nation. As Attorney General, I've had most of the major state agencies as clients, whether it be the Economic Development Commission, the Transportation Commission. I am on a very close relationship with the governor. He was my client for 4 years. You know, he's on my speed dial. And that can be of tremendous benefit to Colorado Springs going forward. So I think that's a couple of things that I uniquely bring to the table.
One of the other questions that came up from readers when we sat down with them is priorities was one of them, so you've already covered that one. The next one was, what's your management style as we look towards having government work better together here in Colorado Springs? Your style that you bring to the equation was a question on readers' minds.
Yeah, and this just isn't hypothetical. I have a track record of a very collaborative leadership style. I have been dealing with people that disagree with me all my life. I've spent tons of time over at the legislature dealing with people of both parties, all across the philosophical spectrum, trying to bring them together in support of an initiative that either as I was head of the legislative committee for the DAs for years. Obviously I had legislative agendas as Attorney General. And I think that you will find, and I've been recognized for the fact that I get along with both sides of the aisle. I'm a consensus builder, and I've got a very collaborative leadership style. This is hard work. This is not something that, you just get it by charm. It's sitting down in a room, looking people in the eye that disagree with you, and saying, okay, here's our area of agreement, here's our areas of disagreement, where can we come together, where can we move forward? And I'm prepared to do that, and I can do it with people that either philosophically disagree with me or issue by issue disagree with me.
Okay. I'm going to do one more and then I'll pass the mic because it's kind of related to that. To that end, the relationship between City Hall and the council has been obviously of issue, and you've addressed that a little bit with your style here. But one of the things that again, people want to know is the city charter. I don't know how much time you had to spend on it, but from what you know about the city charter, do you think the city charter in its current form is adequate to help give us direction as a city on how the city should be managed? And if your answer is no, do you have any at least high-level thoughts on what needs to be changed?
Well, there's a few things that I have identified already that are probably need to be dealt with in charter changes. The council ought to be able to hire and fire their direct reports. That's a given to me, and if the charter needs to be changed to do that, so be it. I have talked to virtually all the city council members, and for that matter, I've talked to the mayor, and I've said, how much of this is personality, how much of this is systemic problem stemming from the new government system? I would say the most common answer is about 80% personality and 20% systemic. I thought the council did the right thing in not going to the ballot this time with any systemic charter changes, because I think we need a new mayor dealing with the council to properly identify which problems were really personality and which of them may in fact be systemic. For example, I understand both sides of the argument about the number of departments. The charter gives the council the right to determine how many departments there are. The mayor's view is the more departments there are, the more times I have to go back to them and ask for monetary transfers. As I say, the charter as it reads lets the council do that. I can't believe that there can't be an accommodation. You get to name the departments, but for budgeting purposes, these are the major departments that I will agree to go back to you if there's any transfer of funds. That just seems to me the kinds of things that you can work out. So I would suggest that we see how a new mayor and council work, and we'll be in a lot better position in a couple of years to say this is a systemic problem that needs to be dealt with by the voters in a charter change.
Governor Hickenlooper has told us on more than one occasion in a setting such as this that he believes one of the issues in Colorado Springs is that the strong mayor system is we don't have a strong enough mayor. That when he was mayor of Denver, he had a lot more discretion over the budget than what is allowed here. And do you think he has a point? I mean, I know we've addressed some of that just now, but do you think that there are areas in which the strong mayor should be more of a strong mayor?
Well, he's certainly accurate in pointing out that our strong mayor isn't the equivalent of the Denver strong mayor. I mean, he's very accurate there. But I think, Wayne, the proponents of the strong mayor system that actually put it on the ballot will acknowledge that to garner as much public support as possible, they were very careful about the amount of power they gave to the mayor. And I think that's appropriate. Once again, I think this is an issue that needs to be determined with a mayor with a little different management style than Steve Bach had. Steve did some great things from the city, but I think even by his own admission would concede that his management style played into kind of I'm the strong mayor kind of personality and persona. I think another mayor dealing with the council is going to expose the legitimate issues, structural issues. Does the mayor need to have more power in certain areas? Does the council need to have more authority in certain areas? And will be much better prepared in the coming years to go to the voters and say, this is a problem, this needs changing, or this needs changing.
While we're on these structural issues, I'd like to ask you about the city attorney. And there's a proposal out there to elect the city attorney. I'd like to know if you think that's a good idea, and if you think there's a problem that, as we've seen, and this could be personality-based as well, but as we've seen under the current Bach administration, the city attorney answers to the mayor, but must also represent the legislative branch, and the two are often at odds. Do you see that as a problem that needs to be?
We should not elect a city attorney. Very few communities do. Some large cities, Los Angeles does, for example, and almost inevitably, it is an independent power base within the city. The city attorney is always maneuvering to be governor, and I just don't think it's constructive. 99% of the cities in this country operate with an appointed city attorney, either by the council or the mayor, and it just does just fine. Look, here's what needs to happen. You need to have a mayor who fully understands and appreciates the proper role of the city attorney. I do. The city attorney is not a bagman for the mayor. Yes, the city attorney the mayor appoints the city attorney with the consent of the council, but the city attorney has a responsibility to give objective legal advice to all sides. Yes, we need to have people in the city attorney's office with the necessary expertise advising the council, but we don't want them to have an independent council that would be at odds with the city attorney and potential litigation between sections of the city. I'm absolutely convinced that if I'm the mayor, 2 or 3 years from now, the council will have a whole different perception of this issue, and they'll recognize that if you have a mayor that understands the proper role, and you have a city attorney that understands the proper role of a city attorney, things will go much more smoothly than they have over the last several years.
Very good. Dan?
Colorado Springs Utilities is something that has come up quite a bit in terms of governance structure. And the two big questions that we have been asked about in terms of the direction for the city are governance structure of Colorado Springs, and also should the city own a utility, or should we be a customer of a larger, more global kind of an organization? While the mayor doesn't unilaterally certainly make those decisions, some of the questions we've been asked are not things that structurally the mayor makes the decisions on, but people would like to know where the potential new mayor candidates stand on that.
Okay. First of all, as I said at the beginning, I have a long history with Colorado Springs, and I've watched Colorado Springs Utilities for a long, long time. Folks, the water operation of the Colorado Springs City Utilities has been nothing short of genius. By all rights, this town would be 40,000 people living off Fountain and Monument Creek. We're a town of 460,000 because the city utilities and our predecessors on the council made very bold decisions. I can only imagine how much it seemed like it cost years ago to say, let's build a reservoir on the west slope of Colorado, Homestake, and let's build a tunnel 7 miles through the Continental Divide and put the water and pump it over the mountain. Let's build Frying Pan, Arkansas. Let's build the Southern Delivery System that's going to supply this town for its growth needs for the next 50 years. So my history brings me to believe that utilities has done a pretty good job, particularly in the water area. Electrical is a very complicated world today. I know that as Attorney General. I've dealt with all the EPA stuff. You've got all these competing interests. On one hand, if we go to a couple years ago, if we go to natural gas, we've got a much more volatile market. Natural gas prices were fluctuating tremendously. That's died down as we've discovered more and more natural gas supplies. We've got to deal with EPA emissions requirements on coal. My guess is coal will be a decreasing player in the energy world as we go forward to the next couple of years. But once again, I think Colorado Springs Utilities is pretty well positioned. I come very slowly to the notion that we ought to sell any portion of it. I like the aspect of local control, and I like the aspect of not having to deal with shareholder value. That's a big part of for-profit companies. Now, governance is a very legitimate issue. If you look around all the municipal utilities in this country, and there's a lot of them, the majority have some sort of board between the utility company and the city council. They have various ranges of power. Some of them are the rate makers, some of them can make large indebtedness decisions and things like that. Others, the city council retains rate making. I think we ought to have a very robust, healthy discussion, and I think we're going to. I think there's folks in the community that want to foster this discussion. My guess is, quite frankly, let's be politically realistic, being the utilities board is one of the main functions that city council still has left. It's kind of their power base, if you will. I doubt very seriously city council will be volunteering to change the governance. So my guess is if it changes, it'll be the vote of the people. And as mayor, not being directly involved in that, I would simply want to make sure that it's a robust, high-level discussion and that everybody's fully informed about what the pros and cons are.
Let's circle back to the city. You've been here a long time, and I have also. And I'm curious about what you would do about our southeastern part of Colorado Springs, which is a blighted, underserved, has a high level of crime, low economic potential. Do you have any vision for that part of the city?
Well, I share, Paula, the vision that a lot of other people have. The southeast quadrant, most exemplified by the South Academy corridor, has serious issues. But a lot of time and effort has actually gone into exploring that. We've had city committees, of which a lot of citizens have been on, and I went in to City Hall, to the planning department, I think it was last Friday, for a briefing on all the Great Streets programs, and in particular the Southeast Quadrant. And I walked out of there with a stack of documents that thick, all the work that's been done about what ought to happen. And I think it's good work. It's citizen input, it's planning input, and there's everything from realigning some key intersections like Hancock and Academy that would greatly enhance that, burying all the power lines out there. I mean, we've got some eyesores out there that the rest of the city doesn't have because we put these huge power lines overhead. And there's a variety of recommendations about the things that a city can do. You know, the city's not going to change everything about it, but the city, infrastructure-wise, can considerably contribute to a renaissance of that area. And I concluded, I sat for several hours and read all this material. I said, you know, most of the work's been done. We just got to do it. We got to garner the resources and start investing in the infrastructure. And that South Academy corridor is probably one of the highest priorities. Now, not just street and road infrastructure, but also keep in mind, as you pointed out, the calls for service for the police department has overwhelmed the Sand Creek division out there. We need a larger police operations center, and it was part of the mayor's proposal, in his proposal to repurpose the skip bonds that were coming due. He had two major police projects. One was a expanded police operations center in the southeast quadrant, and number two was an evidence facility. I think that's something that has to be high on the list of infrastructure improvements for the city. But as I say, we can get more input about it, but a lot of work's been done. I think the game plan is there. The city's just got to have the resources to do it.
Staying on that track for a second, stormwater funding, and funding not just for stormwater, but also for other infrastructure projects. Again, council is the body that would either send to the ballot or approves certain things depending on what type of a thing is proposed. But what's your view on both the need and maybe the way forward?
Dan, and I've actually had some conversations with several members on council. And I know that your editorial board editorialized in favor of the mayor's repurposing of the bonds. But with the failure of that, I think there's an opportunity here to kind of start from scratch. And I don't mean scratch, but I mean in terms, I think we know what the need is. We have tremendous infrastructure needs. We have a lot of that stormwater. But in terms of the mechanism to deal with it, I do think we've got kind of an open book at this point. My objective as mayor would be to spend the first several months with council, with community input, public hearings, groups, saying, okay, can we, obviously you apply fresh eyes to the city budget, look for any funds you can there, but all indications are that the bottom line is that we do not have enough revenue to significantly deal with the backlog of infrastructure projects we have. So you sit down with council, community groups, and you say, okay, here's our problem. So much of it is stormwater, so much of it is other city infrastructure. How do we go about it? What's the mechanism? Do we, go back on a regional approach, or given the fact that the council has, by resolution at least, dedicated $19 million a year to stormwater, do we go just to city voters and say, how about a 10-year sales tax increment, and here's the exact projects we're going to spend it on? As you know, the interesting history is even in El Paso County, in the aftermath of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, we've passed about 60% of tax measures. And that's because people figured out early on, if you go to the voters in El Paso County or Colorado Springs, you got to say, this is what we need money-wise, and here's exactly what we're going to spend it for. And you got to be very clear. And those things, whether it be PPRTA or others, tend to pass if you tell them exactly what it's going to be spent for. And whether it's a property fee or tax, whether it's sales tax for, cap 10 years, I think it has to be pretty simple. I think one of the problems with the stormwater was it was kind of hard to figure out what was permanent, what was, 20 years, was 20 years too long. The mayor's lack of support for it, I think, was, pretty problematic. We got to have something that the mayor is the cheerleader for. And I think if we do our homework and we tell them exactly what we tell the citizens exactly what we're going to spend it on, I think we have an excellent chance of beginning to correct a serious infrastructure backlog, which, as I say, is holding us back in other respects. It's hurting our new job creation potential with existing employers and people moving here.
Marijuana. What is your assessment of the situation in Colorado Springs, given Colorado's new pot legalization laws, and how might you approach that from a public policy standpoint?
Wayne, there's no secret about the fact that I was an opponent of legalization of marijuana. And my opposition was kind of based on my long experience with drug abuse issues. We know from 35 years of research that adolescent use of marijuana is largely a function of their perception of risk. As their perception of risk goes down, their use goes up. That's why we have a significantly higher rate of adolescent use of marijuana in Colorado than the national average. We also have a significantly higher rate of adult use than the national average. We have driven the perception of risk for young people into the ground. It does have risks. 1 in 6 kids that begin smoking marijuana under 18 become addicted. And that, frankly, most of the history of that is based on 3 to 5% THC content, much lower than what we're seeing on the street today and is produced by dispensaries. So my view is that if we have an expanded view of adolescent and young marijuana users, we are buying ourselves a larger drug abuse problem in future years. And the irony of that is that the recipients of the tax dollars aren't the ones that's going to foot the bill. You know, it's really your Social Security disability, your Medicaid, and things like that that pay the cost of drug abuse. A significant percentage of people on Social Security disability, while they may be diagnosed with mood disorders and things like that, have substance abuse problems. That's not where the money goes with marijuana taxation. Now, we have this weird system. I think we have up to 81 medical marijuana dispensaries in El Paso County or Colorado Springs, and that produces an almost de facto legalization in the environment that is somewhat problematic. But for a variety of reasons, including some representations that were made to the United States Army last night at that community forum, I am not a proponent of legalization of recreational marijuana. Having said that, if it is legislatively approved or the voters approve it, I have a long history of, as an executive, carrying out my responsibilities to enforce laws that I don't like. And I would do an excellent job of doing what's necessary for the regulatory scheme and whatever, if that's my responsibility. But I won't be voting for it.
Would you advocate putting something before the voters, perhaps, that would curtail some of the marijuana sales that are going on in Colorado Springs?
That would have to be done on a statewide basis. Almost all of that is dictated by constitutional amendment. The proponents were very careful to make sure that was all constitutional. I would be a proponent of a couple of legislative things that could be done that, frankly, I'm not sure are going to happen this legislative session or not. But for the whole, major things would have to be changed by the voters. And I think we're going to have to, what I have said, and I've done a lot of public speaking, and I get this asked a lot, and I've said most of the people that told me they voted for this said they did so with the notion that this was an experiment. I didn't like the way things were going. I wanted to try something different. Well, if you're engaged in a societal experiment, I would strongly suggest you develop some criteria for what constitutes success or failure. I think we need to look at youth drug abuse rates. I think we have to look at school performance, how it fares in Colorado versus other states in terms of dropouts. Have we, are we a major exporter to other states that don't want legalized marijuana? And so far, all indications are we're a huge exporter to other states that didn't vote for it. I think the Attorney General's office in the next month or so is going to come up with some cases that will make people's eyes open about just how much marijuana is going out of state. And finally, have we curtailed the presence of cartels? My guess is not. They're here trying to sell our marijuana users heroin, cocaine, meth, and a whole bunch of other drugs. Since I've been in town since 2008, one of the social issues that just continues to come up for whoever is mayor at the time, and you're going to get this question a lot, and I'm seeing it on Facebook now. Would you propose a resolution that favors Pridefest? I may or may not, depending upon what sort of regimen I embark upon about resolutions. You can go one or two ways. You can kind of say, let's have all-comers resolutions and, virtually everything that's not illegal activity. The mayor says, I'm declaring this that day. Or you can kind of go to the other side and be very circumspect. I think one of the, about any sort of things, other than, recognizing the anniversary of the city of Colorado Springs and a few other basic things. I'm going to have a discussion with the city attorney's office. There's actually some, cases about this sort of thing and what kind of problems you get in and, being discriminatory and stuff. I'm going to have a conversation with the city attorney's office and embark on, kind of a policy. My guess is I'll be more towards the limited use of proclamations and resolutions rather than everything. But certainly, if we go the everything approach, I'm not going to discriminate against gay rights organizations or anything like that.
I had a question on transit. A lot of our readers send in letters about the poor transit system, even though it has improved under the current Mayor Bach. Would you be in favor of additional routes, more routes in the southern part of town? And we've had a couple of letters where people say that, you know, the buses don't run frequently enough. Yeah.
I had a transit briefing 2 weeks ago. Mayor Bach set up for me, and it was very, very informative. I met with the Transit Coalition yesterday. Just so people understand, we've got about $22 million a year going into the transit system. The transit system consists of fixed bus routes, which is the major part of it, but then you also have federally mandated para-transit, which I think is about $4 million, and you have specialized transit, some of it grant-funded, by which elderly supportive organizations can, Silver Key or whatever, can supply transportation. And then, of course, you can have a private market. Here's the good news. PPRTA, beginning in 2008, has become a reliable source of significant, I think probably a third or more of that $21 million is now the PPRTA investment. Now, the quid pro quo was that, was the city would take over Mountain Metro Transit. The city at the time agreed to what was called a maintenance of effort of $5.8 million a year. No sooner did they do that than the economy tanked. And we are heavily, as you well know, we are 57% dependent on sales tax. It's really kind of an unhealthy mix. This is amazing. Only $19 million of the almost $260 million city general fund comes from property tax. Folks, that's only $1 million more than the Pikes Peak Library District. So we are heavily sales tax dependent. When the sales tax crashed in the Great Recession, we simply could not come up with the money. Mayor Bach has done a good job over the last couple of years of beginning to get back there. I think we have to get back to that. I think we're at 4.075 million now. We need to get back to that maintenance of effort as soon as possible. And Paula, you identified the problems. Even on our main routes, we're only at about every hour. 62% of our riders, 40% are going to work and 22% are going to school. This is not optional activity for them. They need that transportation. I think the leadership of transit is well-intentioned. I think we've got a pretty good team out there. They want to expand it. The size of the city of Colorado Springs is very problematic, 195 square miles. It's impossible to do all the routes you'd like, but we have to do a better job on the main routes, and we have to get some partnerships going. Pikes Peak Community College, which is now a very large institution, UCCS, which is now a very large institution, I think have to get involved in this partnership. A lot of these are students, riders are students going to their facilities, and I think we need to ask them to support this to some extent. Transit, we do not have what a lot of cities have. We don't have a lot of people choosing out of convenience to do transit. I would love it if that was a future development. I mean, if we were able to have routes that people in this room said, boy, I can get on and get off right next to my office, save myself parking expense downtown and things like that. That's what ultimately happened in Denver. When it costs $250 to park downtown, transit looks pretty good to you. That's not where we are yet in Colorado Springs, but we may be there at some point. And we've got to make sure that we do the best job we can to take care of the people that are relying on it right now.
Can I ask a related question? One of the, if you look at transit throughout the country, and even here in Colorado, it works best in Denver. Boulder has a great transit system, same system, RTD. but it has everything to do with density. How many customers do you have per square mile? As this community grows in population, would you favor planning policies that would make it denser so that things like mass transit might work better? And if so, how would you go about that? And if not, why?
Wayne, I hear in that question also a little bit about infilling. Folks, if we don't do something to create infilling, particularly in the Academy corridor, this city is never going to be what we want it to be. The history of it is pretty simple. It's always cheaper to develop raw land. And so when I was a kid, it was South Circle, believe it or not. I remember when it was a dirt road. Then it went to Academy. Then it went to Mark Scheffel and Powers is clearly kind of the hopping place right now. But what's happened is we've had some deterioration of infrastructure and business inside. I think what needs to happen is, number one, we need to stop annexing. We've got the ranch out there that I think is going to be developed over the next several years. I think there's some good plans for it. At that point in time, I think the focus has to be any further development comes back. And here's what I think has to happen. Let's say you've got a virtually abandoned shopping center on Academy, and there's several of them, including Rustic Hills, okay? It may be throwing good money after bad to try and force redevelopment of a shopping center there. What may be the best use, and you may need to provide some incentives for this, but the best use may be residential. You need to just dramatically change the zoning, and let's come back residential, either a multifamily residential or even single family. I think there's a lot of folks that have put some good thought into it. There's an infilling study that's been done, but once again, the city just hasn't had the wherewithal to deal with some of the infrastructure issues that need to take place. But clearly, we need to have to start coming back and increasing the density within the city.
Very quickly on the airport, we've met with the airport management there, and I think we all agree that we have some excellent people in place, but we just can't seem to get out of the shadow of DIA. Do you have any thoughts on what the Springs Airport can do to, push its ridership and, move to the next level?
I do, and I believe that Dan Gallagher is doing a good job out there with what he's got. I think Dan's the right guy for the job. The economics of airports are this. A lot of people think there's tax dollars in our airport. There's none. It's an enterprise. And it has two components. It has commercial, which is your airlines, and it's got general aviation. The more income you can derive from the general aviation sector, the lower your gate fees can be on the commercial side. We've had historically pretty high gate fees. Dan's increasing the income from the general aviation side, and there's a lot of potential to further increase it with this commercial aeronautical zone we've got, which gives tax incentives to companies that are in aeronautical related businesses, okay, to locate out there. And as some of you may know, there's some real good prospects brewing. If we can significantly increase that income and significantly lower our gate fees, then it's a matter of marketing and putting people in the seats. I know, because I wanted to fly out of Colorado Springs a lot in the past on a Monday morning, let's say, rather than drive to Denver, go to DIA. If I was going to be gone for the week, I'd always have my assistant say, can I get out of Colorado Springs? And it was very common that it would cost $300 more. And I couldn't justify that. What I'm seeing is with lower gate fees, we're going to be much more competitive. Then it's a matter of marketing to that 1.7 million people a year that are driving past to go to Denver, maybe trying to convince them that a 20-minute layover in Denver isn't the worst thing in the world, especially when you're avoiding, $120 of parking fees and things like that. So I think the game plan is identified and can be executed to a point where Colorado Springs Airport can become much more viable.
John, we just have a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap up. Staying on economic development for a second, in just listening to you this morning, it seems like that's something that's pretty top of mind for you. There's been a lot of studies over the last year or two that paint a pretty bleak picture for Colorado Springs going forward. Statistically, we're lagging behind the recovery in our own state. And if you look at the growth of the population versus the growth of income and a tax base, there are some pretty bleak pictures out there. Do you believe it's that high of a priority and it's urgent that we focus on economic development? Is that a priority for you?
It's absolutely among the highest priority. And as I said, all my other priorities are directly related to that, Dan. I think changing the political environment is very important to pursuing the job growth priority. Showing investment in infrastructure is very important to pursuing the job growth priority. Now, objectively, part of the reason we've lagged behind some other areas in Colorado is our lack of participation in the industry, in the energy boom. But it goes much deeper than that. And I think it, frankly, has a lot to do with the political environment. We simply have not been attractive enough to economic development. I think that can change, and I'm also, I've met, as part of this process, one of the great things about running for public office, there's a lot of downsides to it, but one of the great things is you meet a lot of people, and I sense a lot of optimism about some things that are percolating in Colorado Springs. I think we've got some real game-changing sorts of things going on that could help us turn this around. As I say, most of the turnaround is going to come from existing businesses growing and expanding, but I also think we have the potential to get some of those folks being chased out of California by the millionaire's tax and things like that. And the airport, a couple of things at the airport are proof of that.
So one of those projects, certainly not the only one, but one of those projects that's been discussed probably more than any other in the community is the City for Champions project. As it relates to City for Champions, and particularly the downtown stadium, what's your view on a path forward, and do you support it?
Let me take the easy part first. The other three parts of the City for Champions are no-brainers. I know there's folks out there that don't think we should have taken the state TIF financing. They don't believe in that. People should understand that if Colorado Springs didn't take the state TIF financing, it's not like it goes back in people's pockets. It would have gone to Broomfield or Aurora or something like that. So I'm not there at all. I think that was the proper step. And three of the projects, Dan, as you know, don't involve any other further local taxpayer investment. The museum's going to happen, and it's going to be a very positive thing for downtown. We're going to raise most of that money privately. If the city has to do some infrastructure things around it, so be it. But that's going to be a very, very positive thing. The sports medicine program at UCCS and, of course, moving the visitor center, those are positive things and can happen without any taxpayer investment. The problem that we need to get to the bottom of with the downtown stadium is, number one, viability. I think very serious discussions have to take place about, without a baseball team down here, if it's just, sports governing, Olympic governing bodies, what kind of crowds do they generate, things like that, and is it even viable for taxpayer investment? And then, secondly, any proposal that does come forward, besides downright analysis of the viability, if it has any burden on the taxpayers, in Colorado it goes to the voters. The taxpayers are going to have the final say if there's any kind of taxpayer investment in a downtown stadium. And then, of course, it's all a matter of how they feel about the pros and cons. Is it a good investment for the city of Colorado Springs? Across the country, it's kind of a mixed bag. I'm reading a book right now about reimagining Greenville. Minor league stadium was a huge deal for it. Other cities you can show it did not help. I know a lot of work's being done, but I don't think you or I have seen, any viable proposals about what this ought to look like and how it ought to be funded.
Okay. Dan, there's one question we've got to get in, and then I'll hand it back off to you. This is from one of the board members who could not be here today. Unfortunately, he wanted to, but couldn't make it. And he would like us to ask, as mayor, what would you do to not only to strengthen relationships with the military in Colorado Springs, but to increase support for the Department of Defense statewide? What do you see as the biggest challenge to that effort?
Wayne, first of all, because I have been involved on a statewide level with a lot of the military support, there is an incredible amount of support for the military in Colorado. One of the things at the meeting yesterday, there was a list of all the legislative things that have been done, tax breaks and things like that for military personnel and a whole variety of things. The showing yesterday from the governor to Senator Brown, Hank Brown was there, Joe Blake was there. I mean, it was very impressive how much Colorado values the military. But as mayor, I will spend every ounce of energy I have, not only trying to create new jobs, but keep what we have. And a huge part of that is the military. And of course, it's not just the jobs. That's a big part of the economy. We want to keep that. But that's part of our persona. We are a military town. And we got to embrace that and continue to do everything we can to keep it that way, including convincing the Army that even if there are inevitable cuts, this is the type of facility that you want to have the least sort of cuts on it. And I thought a great case was made for it at the forum yesterday. I will be heavily involved in that. I will be the city's greatest cheerleader on the tourism front. There's a lot of things that can be expanded there, but rest assured, all the relationships I'll have with all the military facilities, I will be there for them in any manner they need me to be to promote their mission in Colorado Springs.
Okay, well, we've come to the end of the hour. We said we'd only keep you an hour, so we appreciate you being here today, John, and allowing us to also live stream this for the first time ever. Again, we've been with mayoral candidate and former Attorney General John Suthers, and look for us online to be having these kind of interviews with the rest of the mayoral candidates very soon. Thanks.
Thank you for having me once again.
Thank you.